If you just give a positive bias toward men, then a lot of feminism would fall apart. Think about it. If you had a good father, good brothers, good uncles, good granddad, good husband, then when you look at feminism and how it makes patriarchy the enemy, you start to kind of see it for what it is, which is a lot of broken-hearted women who were done wrong maybe by some men, or who played into their own dynamics with men and refused to acknowledge it and take any form of accountability, whichever way you pick. I think that they have accomplished so much when in reality, it's possible that we have accomplished a lot as a species with men at the head of these phenomenons that have thrust us into the 21st century. We've accomplished things through the Industrial Revolution. We've accomplished things through the promotion of secularism, although there's been some unintended consequences. And we've accomplished a lot through capitalism. And therefore, women have been liberated. Welcome back to the Femcast, where I do reaction videos over here on the Real Fem Sapien YouTube channel. And today we are going to be reacting to my Substack article that I wrote with my own two hands about debunking feminism, because I'm doing an entire series where I'm going to go point by point about why feminism was never good from the get-go. It's got some really dark roots, but today we're going to be focusing on neurolinguistic programming and women's suffrage. So if you like this content, make sure you give it a big thumbs up, subscribe down below, and hit the notification bell. If you are a pick me and you are watching this video, make sure you comment pick me in the comment section down below. I want to see y'all represent hashtag pick me nation, we up. Feminism is a really easy subject for me to unpack and debunk because I was never a feminist. If you go look at my very first video, it's called Latina Leaves Ideology, and you can see in there that I actually have never been a feminist because that is super far-fetched to me in my mind. It seemed like something that my culture was not particularly concerned with. But if you just give a positive bias toward men, then a lot of feminism would fall apart. Think about it. If you had a good father, good brothers, good uncles, good granddad, good husband, then when you look at feminism and how it makes patriarchy the enemy, you start to kind of see it for what it is, which is a lot of broken-hearted women who were done wrong maybe by some men, or who played into their own dynamics with men and refused to acknowledge it and take any form of accountability. Whichever analysis you choose, it just seems like it's a lot of women that are wounded, that are trying to find someone to blame. And so they've decided that they're going to blame men. One of the things that I think is really confusing about feminism is that they think that they have accomplished so much, when in reality, it's possible that we have accomplished a lot as a species with men at the head of these phenomenons that have thrust us into the 21st century. We've accomplished things through the Industrial Revolution. We've accomplished things through the promotion of secularism, although there's been some unintended consequences. And we've accomplished a lot through capitalism. And therefore, women have been liberated because divorce is only common or prevalent in cultures where women are able to get divorced, which means you are not economically dependent on your husband for survival, or if you want to get it down even further than that, you're not relying on him for resources to include calories. So you're able to separate from the marriage. That is a sign of economic liberation. That is a sign of technological innovation that we have access to now as women. So I think that it was always the natural course that women were going to be liberated. It just took some time, but you can't really convince me that it was men holding us back the whole time, because men have mothers, men have sisters, men have wives, men have daughters. How far as a species would we have come if one half of us was actually holding down the other half? I don't think we'd be here today. If you hear me struggling to breathe, I am very pregnant and I'm also just getting over a cold. So just let me take my pauses every now and then. The other instance where I am thoroughly confused about feminism is that they think that women are the reason behind women's suffrage. I also don't think so at all. I think that for thousands of years, people couldn't vote. people. You know what we had before democracies? We had monarchies. So your average guy couldn't even vote, and therefore your average woman couldn't vote. There were several instances in history where women did have the opportunity to vote. They just had to own land. And the thing about owning land, if you think about all of the luxuries we have today, is, you know, it's probably really hard to be a boss babe prior to the Industrial Revolution if you're always pregnant or breastfeeding. Keep in mind, hormonal birth control was released in the 1950s. So maybe that's why women couldn't vote. I don't know. But voting was only afforded to nobility. So your average man, who is and was, most men couldn't vote. And then you will see, once we deep dive into this article, that once men got the right to vote, women got the right to vote shortly thereafter. So you tell me, do men love us? Do they hate us? I don't know. I like to think that they have a very easily manipulated protective instinct over women. The time has come to review the article. And before we get started, because I already know there's hate lurkers, I already know, y'all must be thinking,
Aly, aren't you on YouTube because of feminism? Aren't you so liberated?
People act like women weren't working before feminism to their family's benefit, but whatever, I digress. No, I think that I am here because society has advanced and given me a lot of opportunity and a lot of freedom. Moving on, let's talk about neurolinguistic programming and feminism. If you look at the origins of the feminist movement, you can easily conclude that it is, at best and at worst, a female supremacy movement. Feminism is not bad because it is feminism. Feminism is terrible because it is ideological supremacy, which is always immoral. You need only to look at its name, feminism, to understand its intent was never about equality. If you can understand this, you can understand there are no waves of feminism. There is only rebranding. There is no way to make an ideological supremacy movement into something palatable to a rational mind and critical thinker, as these movements were and will always be a charade. Why any leftist academic could continue to champion feminism in good conscience is beyond me. If you live long enough or are wise enough, you realize that PhD does not equate to intelligence. Say this all the time, you can get so educated you become stupid. Case in point, PhDs in education. Case in point, some PhDs in psychology. Case in point, some PhDs in sociology. Not all academics are created equal. I'm just saying, I tend to take the biochemistry PhD in much higher regard than the PhD in social work or the PhD in education. I'm sorry. The social sciences have rotted in a post-industrial society where many bars of discrimination and oppression have suddenly vanished. What will they study now in a world of great economic and personal freedom? Anything they like and can manipulate into a societal problem, even if it exists only in their minds. Remember, selling problems without solutions keeps many employed, such as doctoral professors, graduate academics, social science grant writers, and 501c charity employees. They have rent to pay and kids to feed like the rest of us. In this article, I will teach you how to be brighter than any PhD fourth wave feminist by virtue of understanding the movement is a farce and not worth acknowledgement. And you all are going to see on the horizon, there's going to be fifth wave feminism that's all about femininity, that's all about taking back surrogacy and calling it what it is, which is essentially using poorer women as cattle. But you will notice, though, that feminists will remain pro-choice, even fifth wave feminists. I haven't seen one decide to refute being pro-choice publicly yet. Shout out to Mary Harrington and shout out to Louise Perry. Let me know when we are going to call termination of pregnancy what it is. But yes, the fifth wave feminist movement is going to come out to fix everything that the first four waves broke, without ever addressing the fact that it has terrorist roots or that maybe it's taking credit for events that occurred upstream from the movement. Okay, fine, we'll let the women play. Keep in mind, if you're a woman watching this content and you don't want to be a feminist, you don't have to inherently identify as anti-feminist. I don't identify as anti-feminist. If I were to ever go on a panel about feminism, they probably will tag me as an anti-feminist, but In my mind, to acknowledge anti-feminism is to acknowledge feminism, and I don't think the movement warrants any credit whatsoever. So I simply choose the label of a woman who is after her own interests, after her family's own interests, is prioritizing family over a career, but is not career averse. As you can tell, I really enjoy having this YouTube channel. You don't have to identify as feminist or anti-feminist. It's a very Western lens to label everything. I've got to figure out what to call me. Well, what if you are simply a woman determining her own path along the way? You don't need a label for that, do you? Before we reflect, let's address the elephant in the room for female readers. You might be thinking, why would I disavow something that has granted me rights and freedoms as a woman? I would be oppressed without it. First, entertain that this idea might be false. It is equally possible that women were liberated because men care for women and always would have freed them once the average man was liberated. It is also possible that we have the autonomy we do today as Western women because we were past the Industrial Revolution and capitalism was a successful experiment that resulted in women's economic mobility. I like how we pretend like feminism did everything when hormonal birth control was a huge feat. I mean, even menstrual pads and tampons, they were a pretty big deal that allowed us to work on our menstrual cycle. But yes, it was clearly the suffragists and the suffragettes that did it for us. Yes. Remember, feminists need to construct a narrative for their cause. Therefore, they must claim victory over feats upstream to their movement. This is the feminist chicken or the egg. What came first, modern human liberation or feminism? I'm not going to get into the entirety of this article because the portion that I'm about to read to you is actually behind a paywall. So I want to make sure I maintain some security over that. That way my readers who pay are not being gypped. However, I can give you the two ideas and expand on them a little bit further. So when you're looking at the word feminism, this is why neurolinguistic programming matters. It is that all things good are female, feminine, feminism. And who is the enemy to feminists? The enemy to feminism is the patriarchy. That prefix pater actually means father. In a sense, we can see that feminists have demonized fathers through neurolinguistic programming. Maybe it wasn't their intent. I think it was entirely their intent to demonize fathers because that would be the archetypal good guy that we're all looking for. A loving, caring father, even close to God. If you want to look at an Abrahamic faith, we do have a male God who is seen as an all-knowing father and is a protector. So we need to knock men down a peg, if you get what I'm saying here. If feminism was about equality, it wouldn't be called feminism. It would be called egalitarianism, but it's not about that. It's about female supremacy, which is how you can see that they've been able to demonize fathers, the best version of male that is out there in art, literature, history, and in our hearts as women. You know what you're missing if you didn't have a father. And if you have a father who's a good father, you love him to pieces, even if he does really weird man things that you don't really want to do. Maybe you don't want to play spades with your dad, you don't want to get a pedicure with your dad, but you know you can call him at a moment's notice. I understand that there are fathers out there that are not the best. However, that is a much more in-depth conversation than I can get into because we very rarely reflect on, well, why did mom choose it? I mean, I'm not saying that mom was wrong because both parents could be wrong in a sense and both parents can be right in different ways. I am simply saying that it's very common to publicly bash your dad, but it's not very common to publicly bash your mom. Which again is very weird, but if you look at neurolinguistic programming, it basically means that the words that we say have meaning and shape the way that we think, which is why we have to be mindful when we're talking about gender roles, the words that we use. What do you think about the word submissive versus the word cooperative? I'm not offended by the word submissive, but a lot of women are. What do you think about the word subservient versus the word submissive? What do you think about the word homemaker versus unpaid labor, right? These are things that we have to be mindful of when we're engaging in these conversations because what narrative are you feeding into? When women call motherhood a job, that validates that leftist narrative that says, oh my gosh, that's unpaid labor. Maybe motherhood isn't a job. Maybe it's a vocation. Maybe it's a profession. You can take it very seriously and be disciplined and well-read and well-researched as a mother. But to call it a job, is that what we're going to go with? And what is that going to shape our perspective of our children, our husbands, our plight as women? Because we go through a different plight than men, right? We each struggle in our own behind-the-scenes features. If you were to identify as a feminist, which means that you think that the patriarchy is real and that it's holding you down, not holding you up by any metrics, although I could get into that some other time, that's going to make it really hard for you to get along with a man because you think that he's inherently oppressive. It's food for thought. So when it comes to the patriarchy, all things that are bad are male. And when it comes to feminism, all things that are good are female. Now on to women's suffrage, because like I said, it took thousands of years for people to get the right to vote. People. Okay, so then once men get the right to vote in the United States of America, because that's a country that I am primarily concerned with in my content, all men are granted suffrage in 1870. Initially, the right to vote was only given to white men who were tax-paying or property-owning. In 1869, Wyoming was the first territory to grant women suffrage. In 1920, all women received the right to vote with the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment. In America, once this right was granted to all men in 1870, women received suffrage in 1920. Once men were liberated, they liberated women within 50 years. Does anybody ever think about that? Really, in your mind, a man who has a mom, who has a grandma, who has a wife, who has a daughter, you think that they wouldn't give them any say in society? They just, why? Why do we think that? Why? I cannot conceive. I just can't. This does not seem like an evil, oppressive patriarchy, all things considered. On the contrary, this is an act of kindness toward women as a natural course of good men gaining influence and being able to undo the works of bad men. I'm of the opinion that men have an inherently protective instinct over women that is probably due to evolution in some way, shape, or form. And I'm talking about evolutionary psychology because women are the smaller, weaker sex. We produce offspring. Eggs are expensive. Sperm is cheap. Therefore, men are willing to constantly go at it for us in defense of us at any point in time. That's even been theorized as a reason for war, is to protect women and children. Once wars are initiated, men need to fight so that bad things don't happen to their women and their children. And if you don't believe me, you can look at mass shootings that are out there in media where men will jump in front of bullets for women that they don't know or for girlfriends as well. They naturally try to help the women and children outside of the line of fire. Aside from that, another example of the male protective instinct, and yes, this is anecdotal, but I still think that men have a protective instinct either through conservatism. You can see how we want men to protect and provide financially, and then we can see through feminism, we want men to turn a blind eye to some of our poor behavior as women while also allowing us to behave in our best interest per our mating strategy. So we want men to protect us from other men who wouldn't let us act in those ways. If you think about it, I know it's hard. It's like a hamster wheel. You'll get there at some point. Stay subscribed. Stay subscribed to the channel. But an example of this male protective instinct that is anecdotal is when Amaranth came out with having an abusive husband, a male viewer sent her 57,000 euros in cash and a bodyguard. So that's one example of the male protective instinct and how it could come from darn near anybody. The problem with feminists is that they don't understand that there are amazing feminine contributions to society. We make the humans. We make the culture. I don't need to sit here as a woman and come out and try to conquer the professional world. If I do, if I can make a dent in the universe, even better. But it's a huge contribution to make people and then to raise good people. You wouldn't feel so bad reflecting on history if you could just acknowledge what an incredible feat that is for women. But because feminine attributes, feminine tasks, feminine feats are downplayed, that's why feminists have to focus on masculine professionalism in order for women to look important. And that's why women who stay home end up feeling bad. In the comment section down below, please inform us how bad you feel at times or ashamed you have felt at times. if you, as a woman, chose to stay home, or if you chose to get married, have children, because it's considered not popular or not cute, not aesthetically pleasing, which, whatever. I'm at a point where it's like, enjoy the chic line, let them burn. You don't want to get married, you don't want to have babies. Cool. The pick-me's, we're going to figure it out, and we're going to make a community. So you do you, boo-boo. And even more so, in regard to the patriarchy that did actually protect and liberate women to where we have so much autonomy today through capitalism, through industrialism, through suffrage. If women truly wanted glory, they would look closer and see their contributions to modern liberation. They birthed the men who would do good for all. That is how women work best to better mankind. Alrighty, let me know what you think about this video in the comment section down below. And if you are starting to see how feminism is bullpucky, hot garbage, nonsense, ideological. I mean, really, you know, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying, there's a lot of feminists out there that believe in crystals. You know, you want to be associated with them? Okay. I'll stop. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.